Last Tuesday, while looking for our house insurance papers in my husband's desk drawer, I found a marriage certificate dated 3 months ago with his name and another woman's. This was the same man who had fallen to his knees in our living room just 1 year earlier, tears streaming down his face, swearing on his mother's grave that he would never lie to me again after I caught him hiding a second phone. The man who promised our pastor, our children, and our entire family that his dishonesty was behind him. The man who still kissed me goodbye every morning before heading to what I now know was not just his demanding job, but an entire second life with another wife who had no idea I existed. I stared at that cream-colored certificate with the gold seal, my hands trembling as I traced his signature, the same handwriting that had signed birthday cards for our 3 children, our 22-year mortgage, and countless anniversary cards claiming eternal love. Only this time, it wasn't my name beside his. It was someone named Aminata Diallo, and according to this legal document, government-stamped and official, my husband of 17 years was now her husband too. If you've ever experienced betrayal, you know that sickening feeling when your entire reality shifts beneath your feet. But stay with me, because what happened next showed me a strength I never knew I had. And if you like stories of women who refuse to be broken by men's deception, please like and subscribe to hear more incredible stories of resilience and triumph. Before the certificate that shattered everything, my life had a comfortable predictability to it. I'm Esther Owusu, 47 years old, born in Accra, Ghana, but living in Maryland for the past 25 years. I work as a hospital administrator, a job I've held for 15 years and that I'm proud of. I climbed from receptionist to department head through night school and determination while raising 3 children. My husband, Daniel Owusu, 49, works in international logistics. At least that's what he's always told me. We met at a community center dance when I was 30. He charmed me with his smooth talking, impeccable dressing, and the way he made me feel like the only woman in the room. When he proposed after just 6 months, my sisters warned me it was too fast, but I was certain I'd found my forever partner. Our wedding day was everything I'd dreamed of as a girl. 250 guests, a beautiful church ceremony, my father walking me down the aisle, and Daniel looking at me with such devotion I thought my heart would burst. We bought our colonial-style home in the suburbs a year later, painted the walls ourselves, and planted a garden I still tend every spring. Our children, David, 16, Abina, 14, and Kofi, 10, completed what I thought was our perfect family. Daniel traveled often for work, sometimes 2 weeks out of every month. I missed him during these trips, but I understood sacrifice was part of building our future. We had routines when he was home. Sunday church, followed by family dinner, Saturday morning breakfast with the kids, date nights every other Friday. He called every night when away, always remembering to ask about the children's activities and my day at work. Our savings account had grown steadily over the years. We were planning a trip to Ghana next summer to visit my extended family and show the children their heritage. Daniel had recently suggested we invest in rental property as we looked ahead to retirement. Our 20th anniversary was approaching, and we'd spoken of renewing our vows. Daniel wasn't perfect. He could be forgetful about household responsibilities, sometimes worked too much, and had a tendency to make decisions without consulting me. But every marriage has its challenges, and I believed ours was solid. Even when I found that second phone last year with suspicious text messages, I chose to believe his explanation about work contacts he needed to keep separate. When the tearful confession and promises came, I chose forgiveness because that's what you do when you love someone. That's what you do when you've built a life together. This was the foundation of my existence. A respected career, a beautiful family, a husband I adored despite occasional doubts, and a future mapped out with care. The Esther from before the certificate believed in commitment and family above all else. She believed her husband when he said never again. The first signs that something wasn't right began about 7 months ago. Daniel's travel schedule suddenly increased. Instead of 2 weeks a month, he was gone for 3. The calls home became shorter, often interrupted by poor connections or emergency work situations. When he was home, he seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly and taking calls in the backyard where I couldn't hear. One evening, I was folding laundry when I noticed a receipt in his pants pocket. It was from a high-end jewelry store in Philadelphia, a city he hadn't mentioned visiting. The receipt was for a woman's bracelet worth $3,200. Our anniversary wasn't for months. My birthday had just passed, and it was far too expensive for our daughter. When I casually asked about his recent trip, mentioning Philadelphia specifically, he stiffened momentarily before smoothly explaining he'd had an unexpected meeting there. When I asked about the jewelry receipt, he smiled and said, "You weren't supposed to find that yet. It's an early anniversary gift." I wanted to believe him. The bracelet never appeared. Around this time, Daniel updated the passwords on our joint bank accounts. "Just being security conscious," he explained. "There's been some fraud at work." He gave me the new passwords, but 2 weeks later, they changed again. This time, he claimed he forgot to tell me. My closest friend Vivian noticed changes I had been trying to ignore. During our weekly coffee meetup, she gently asked if everything was okay between Daniel and me. "Why would you ask that?" I said, stirring my coffee longer than necessary. "He seems different lately," she said carefully. "When I saw you both at church Sunday, he barely looked at you. And when Pastor Matthews asked about his travels, his stories didn't add up." I defended him, of course. Daniel was under pressure at work. He was tired. Things would return to normal when this busy period passed, but Vivian's concerns planted a seed. I began paying closer attention. I noticed Daniel's clothes sometimes smelled of unfamiliar perfume. His explanations about delayed flights and extended trips became more elaborate, with details that contradicted previous stories. He became irritable when questioned about his schedule. Then came the credit card statement with hotel charges in Baltimore, just 40 miles from our home, on nights he was supposedly in Chicago. When I questioned this, he became angry, accusing me of spying on him and not trusting him after he'd promised to be honest. "I thought we were past this, Esther," he said, his voice cold. "I'm working myself to death for this family, and this is the thanks I get. Those charges are from the company retreat. They must have used my card by mistake." I apologized, feeling ashamed for doubting him. He softened, pulling me into a hug and kissing my forehead. "It's okay, babe. I know the travel is hard on both of us. It'll slow down soon, I promise." That night, while Daniel slept, I sat in our kitchen staring at the credit card statement. Something felt deeply wrong. The confident, independent woman I'd always been would never have accepted such flimsy explanations. But the wife and mother I'd become was terrified of disrupting the family I'd worked so hard to build. I called the hotel in Baltimore the next day, pretending to be a secretary confirming my boss's stay. "Yes," said the receptionist. "Mr. Owusu was here those nights. He's one of our regular guests." Regular. The word echoed in my head all day. That evening, I checked Daniel's suitcase before he unpacked from his latest trip. Tucked into a side pocket was a receipt for a romantic restaurant in Baltimore. Dinner for two on a night he was supposedly stuck in Denver due to weather delays. The date on the receipt was yesterday. That marriage certificate didn't just materialize in Daniel's desk by accident. I was looking for our insurance papers because our son Kofi had broken his arm at soccer practice, and I needed the policy information for the hospital. Daniel was away, in Singapore, he claimed, and wasn't answering his phone. The insurance folder wasn't where it should have been in our filing cabinet. Remembering Daniel had been reviewing our policies recently, I checked his desk in the home office. In the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of work folders, was a slim manila envelope. Inside wasn't our family insurance papers, but something that made my heart stop, a government-issued marriage certificate. The names leapt off the page, Daniel Kwame Owusu and Aminata Diallo. The date showed they were married just 3 months ago in a small civil ceremony in Baltimore County. Everything froze. The sounds of our home, the dishwasher running, our daughter practicing piano downstairs, the neighborhood kids playing outside, all faded away. In that moment, there was only me and this document that proved my husband of 17 years, the father of my children, had married another woman while still married to me. I checked the signature 3 times. It was definitely Daniel's. The distinctive way he looped his D and crossed his U was unmistakable. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate deception of the most profound kind. Clutching the certificate, I sank into Daniel's office chair. My mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? How long had they been together? Did she know about me? About our children? Did anyone else know? Was this even legal? Then a more immediate question surfaced. What would I do now? I considered calling Daniel immediately, but realized I needed more information first. With shaking hands, I searched the rest of the drawer and found a leather-bound checkbook for an account I didn't recognize at a different bank than ours. The address listed was in Baltimore. Next was a small box containing a key. Not a house key. It looked like a key to a storage unit or safe deposit box. There was also a photo, hidden inside a work notebook. Daniel stood with his arm around a beautiful woman in her mid-30s, both smiling in front of what looked like an apartment building. She wore an engagement ring. I sat there for what felt like hours, though the clock showed only 20 minutes had passed. My son's broken arm, the reason for my search, seemed insignificant compared to my shattered life. I called Vivian, my voice barely a whisper. Can you take Kofi to the emergency room? I can't leave the house right now. Esther, what's wrong? Concern filled her voice. Please, just come get him. I'll explain later. After she picked up Kofi, I sat at the kitchen table with the marriage certificate, the checkbook, and the photos spread before me. I needed a plan. The woman who had always prided herself on being strong, independent, and faithful was now faced with undeniable evidence that her life was built on lies. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, a cold, clear determination washed over me. Whatever happened next, I would not be a victim. I would not be the fool who didn't see what was happening. I would not be the woman who stood by her man despite his betrayal. I took out a notebook and began to write. I needed to understand the full scope of Daniel's deception before confronting him. I needed evidence, facts, and a strategy. Most importantly, I needed to protect myself and my children. By midnight, I had made 3 decisions. I would not confront Daniel until I had gathered more information. I would secure copies of all our financial records immediately. Would find out exactly who Aminata Diallo was. The Esther who went to bed that night was not the same woman who had woken up that morning. Something fundamental had shifted. The foundation of trust that had anchored my life was gone, and in its place was a resolve I didn't know I possessed. I stored the marriage certificate, checkbook, and photo in a safe place, then cleaned up Daniel's office to look untouched. When he called the next morning to check on Kofi, I answered normally, revealing nothing of what I had discovered. How's our boy? He asked, sounding concerned. He'll be fine. Just a clean break. 6 weeks in a cast, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I wish I could be there. This conference is crucial. I can't get away. We understand, I said. When will you be back? Friday night late. Don't wait up. We'll be here, I said, already knowing I would use these 3 days to uncover the truth about the man I thought I knew. As I hung up, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time Daniel Owusu underestimated me. The morning after finding the marriage certificate, I dropped the children at school and called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I had 3 days before Daniel returned, and I intended to use every minute effectively. My first stop was our bank. I spoke with Mrs. Peterson, the manager who had handled our accounts for years. I need to print statements for all our joint accounts for the past 3 years, I explained, and I need information on any accounts in my husband's name that I might not be aware of. She looked at me with sympathy. Perhaps my expression revealed more than my words. Mrs. Owusu, I can provide statements for joint accounts and any accounts where you're listed. For accounts solely in Mr. Owusu's name, you would need his authorization. I nodded, understanding the limitations. Please give me what you can. An hour later, I left with a folder full of statements. Sitting in my car in the bank parking lot, I began reviewing them immediately. What I found sent a chill through me. Regular transfers, $4,000 to $6,000 monthly, had been moving from our joint savings to an account I didn't recognize for the past 2 years. Our retirement fund, which should have contained nearly $180,000, now showed just over $42,000. Next, I drove to the courthouse where public records were kept. With the help of a clerk, I accessed property records for Baltimore County. There it was. A townhouse purchased 14 months ago in the names of Daniel Owusu and Aminata Diallo as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. The mortgage amount was $425,000. Requested a copy of the deed and mortgage documents, paying the fee with cash. The address matched the one on the checkbook I'd found. Back in my car, I entered the address into my GPS. The townhouse was in an upscale neighborhood in Baltimore, about 45 minutes from our home. I debated driving there immediately, but decided gathering more information first was wiser. I visited our family attorney, Michael Lee, who had handled our wills and other legal matters for years. Esther, this is unexpected. How can I help you? Michael smiled as his assistant showed me into his office. I placed the copy of the marriage certificate on his desk. I found this yesterday. I need to understand my legal position. Michael's smile faded as he examined the document. Where did you get this? In my husband's desk drawer. He studied it carefully, then looked up at me with concern. If this is authentic, then Daniel has committed bigamy, which is a criminal offense. As his legal wife, you have certain protections, but this situation is complicated. We need to verify the certificate's authenticity first. I nodded. And if it is real, then you have options. We can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and bigamy, which would likely give you favorable terms regarding assets and support. But first, let's gather more information. Do you have access to your financial records? I slid the bank statements across his desk. He's been systematically moving money for at least 2 years. Michael reviewed the statements, his expression darkening. This looks like deliberate financial diversion. We need to act quickly to protect your assets before more disappears. He helped me draft emergency petitions to freeze our joint accounts and prevent Daniel from selling or transferring any jointly owned property. We also began paperwork for a legal separation. What about the children? I asked, my voice finally cracking. Michael's expression softened. The courts will prioritize their well-being. Given these circumstances, you would likely receive primary custody, with Daniel granted visitation, but every case is different. I left Michael's office with a plan and a scheduled follow-up appointment. My next stop was a private investigator recommended by Michael Janelle Morris, operated her investigation firm from a modest office building. A former police detective in her 50s, she listened carefully as I explained my situation. I need to know everything, I told her. How long this has been going on, whether there are more women, other properties, hidden accounts, anything that might affect my children's future security. Janelle nodded. I've seen this before, unfortunately. Men with double lives will focus on basic surveillance, financial investigation, and background on Ms. Diallo. I'll need a retainer to start. I wrote her a check from my personal account, one Daniel couldn't access. One more thing, I said, sliding the photo of Daniel and Aminata across her desk. I need to know if she knows about me, if she's a victim too or part of this deception. We'll find out, Janelle promised. I'll have preliminary information in 48 hours. My final stop that day was to see Pastor Matthews at our church. I needed spiritual guidance, as much as legal advice. I didn't show him the marriage certificate that felt too private to share outside necessary legal channels, but I explained that I had discovered definitive evidence of Daniel's infidelity and deception. He's been living a double life, Pastor. Everything I believed about our marriage was a lie. Pastor Matthews sighed deeply. I've counseled you both for years. I'm deeply sorry, Esther. What do you need from me now? Prayers for clarity and strength, I said, and practical advice about how to tell my children their father has betrayed us all. There's no easy answer there, he said gently. But children are resilient when given honesty with love. When will you confront Daniel? When I have all the facts. I need to protect myself and my children first. He nodded. That's wise. Remember, Esther, even in darkness, God is present. You're not alone in this. That evening, I picked up my children from their activities, helped with homework, and prepared dinner as if it were any normal day. I marveled at my own composure, wondering when the emotional collapse would come. After the children were asleep, I sat in my bedroom and finally allowed myself to feel. The tears came in waves, angry sobs that I muffled with a pillow to keep from waking the children. I cried for the years wasted loving a man who could betray me so completely, for the embarrassment of being so thoroughly deceived, and for my children who would soon learn their father wasn't the man they thought. When the tears subsided, I felt strangely emptied but clear-headed. I created a secure email account and sent myself copies of all documents I'd gathered. I made an inventory of valuables in our home, photographing jewelry, artwork, and other significant possessions as evidence of marital assets, looking at our wedding photo on my nightstand. Daniel's smile now seeming sinister rather than loving, I removed my wedding ring and placed it in my jewelry box. The indentation on my finger felt strange, like a phantom limb after amputation. I slept fitfully, waking every few hours with new questions, new angles to investigate. By morning, I had a list of tasks for day 2 of my investigation. The second day began with a call to our insurance company. I requested copies of all policies, beneficiary designations, and recent changes. I discovered Daniel had removed me as beneficiary from his life insurance 6 months ago, replacing me with Aminata Diallo. I contacted our credit card companies, requesting detailed statements for the past 3 years. The pattern was clear. Regular charges at restaurants, hotels, and shops in Baltimore that Daniel had never mentioned. There were jewelry purchases beyond the bracelet I'd found the receipt for. A total of over $22,000 spent at high-end jewelers in the past year alone. Checking our safe, I found that several pieces of family jewelry were missing, items I rarely wore but had sentimental value, including my grandmother's gold necklace from Ghana and diamond earrings Daniel had given me for our 10th anniversary. That afternoon, I drove to my children's school and requested a private meeting with their counselor, Mrs. Washington. Without revealing specific details, I explained that our family would soon be going through significant changes. I'm concerned about how this will affect them emotionally and academically, I said. I want to make sure support is available when they need it. Mrs. Washington assured me the school had resources to help children through family crises and would monitor my children closely once I gave her the signal. On my way home, Janelle called with preliminary findings. Aminata Diallo, 36, works as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She was born in Senegal, but has been a U.S. citizen since 2010. She meets Daniel every Tuesday and Thursday at the Baltimore townhouse, plus most weekends when he claims to be traveling for work. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Does she know about me? That's unclear. She doesn't wear a wedding ring in public except when Daniel is present. They socialize as a couple with her friends and colleagues. They're registered for healthcare as spouses. She uses both her name and Aminata Owusu in different contexts. Have you observed the townhouse? Yes, it's well furnished, fully established as a residence. There are framed photos of them together throughout the home, visible through windows. No photos of you or your children were observed. I swallowed hard. How did you get that information? We have methods. Legal ones, she assured me. I've also confirmed the marriage certificate is genuine. They were legally married 3 months ago at the Baltimore County Courthouse with 2 witnesses present. But that's bigamy. It's illegal. Yes. Either she doesn't know about you, or they both committed fraud. I'm still investigating financial connections. I'll have more tomorrow. That night, I searched our home thoroughly while the children visited friends. In Daniel's home office, behind the false bottom of a desk drawer, I found another phone. Not the one I'd discovered last year, but a newer model. It was password protected, but I knew Daniel's patterns. On my 3rd attempt, our wedding anniversary ironically, I gained access. The messages confirmed everything. Daily text to Aminata, filled with endearments, plans for their future, discussions about their home, their finances, even talk of having children. In one particularly painful exchange, Daniel complained about work stress during what I knew was our family vacation to Florida. Photos showed their life together, holidays, dinners with friends, even a weekend trip to New York I'd thought he'd taken for work. There were intimate photos I couldn't bring myself to examine closely. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. While searching for missing financial documents in our bedroom, I found a letter tucked inside Daniel's Bible, a Bible I had never seen him open in our years together. It was a love letter from Aminata, dated just 2 weeks ago. My beloved husband, these past 3 months as your wife have been everything I dreamed of. Every day I thank Allah for bringing you into my life 5 years ago, and for your patience as we waited to make our union official. The life we are building together fills me with such joy and purpose. I understand the complications with your work that require such discretion about our marriage, But I dream of the day when we can share our happiness openly with the world. Until then, I treasure our private paradise. The doctor confirmed yesterday what we suspected. I am 6 weeks pregnant. Our child, our family's beginning. I wanted to tell you in person, but couldn't hold this joy inside any longer. I cannot wait to see your face when you return home tomorrow. Forever yours, Aminata, 5 years. They had been together for 5 years, nearly a third of my marriage. And now she was pregnant with his child. I photographed the letter, then returned it exactly as I'd found it. Sitting on the edge of our bed, the bed we had shared for 17 years, I finally felt the full weight of Daniel's betrayal crush me. I had been living with a stranger, loving a lie, building a life on quicksand. The third day of my investigation brought the final pieces of the puzzle. Janelle provided a comprehensive report documenting Daniel's double life. His business trips perfectly aligned with his time at the Baltimore townhouse. Credit card records showed regular patterns of spending that supported 2 separate households. Most devastating was the evidence that Daniel had been systematically draining our joint assets. Beyond the transfers I'd already discovered, Janelle found an offshore account in the Cayman Islands containing approximately $340,000. Money taken from our family business investments, retirement accounts, and home equity line of credit. He's been planning this for years, Janelle explained. The financial evidence suggests he intended to eventually leave you with minimal assets while establishing financial security with Ms. Diallo. What about her? Is she aware of me? Janelle hesitated. We managed to speak with her under the pretext of delivering a package. Based on that conversation and other evidence, we believe she genuinely doesn't know about you. She referred to herself as the first Mrs. Owusu and mentioned Daniel's frequent international travel for work. She believes his family is all in Ghana. I felt a complex emotion, relief that I wasn't the only one deceived, but also fresh pain, knowing another woman would soon experience the same devastation I was feeling. With Michael's help, I spent that day securing my position. We filed emergency motions to freeze assets and prevent Daniel from removing our children from the state. I transferred my personal possessions of value to a safe deposit box in my name only. I withdrew $15,000 from our joint checking account, my legal entitlement according to Michael, and deposited it in a new account at a different bank. I changed the locks on our house with the help of a locksmith recommended by Janelle, explaining that my keys had been lost. I backed up important family photos and documents to secure cloud storage and remove Daniel's access to our home security system. That evening, I sat down with Vivian and told her everything. She listened without interruption, her face showing shock, anger, and deep compassion. I suspected he was cheating, she said when I finished. But this is beyond comprehension, Esther. I need your help tomorrow, I said. Daniel returns tonight. I'm confronting him in the morning after the children leave for school. I want you there as a witness. Of course, whatever you need, we made a plan. Vivian would take the children to school and activities, keeping them away until I called. She would be present when I confronted Daniel, not to intervene, but to ensure my safety and provide a witness to whatever transpired. As she left, Vivian hugged me tightly. You're the strongest woman I know, Esther. You'll get through this. That night, I prepared the final elements of my confrontation. I organized all evidence in a logical sequence. I rehearsed what I would say, determined to remain calm and focused despite the emotional storm inside me. I wrote letters to each of my children explaining in age-appropriate terms what was happening, to be given to them if necessary. Around midnight, I heard Daniel's key in the door. The old lock no longer worked with his key, and I listened as he tried repeatedly to enter. Finally, he called my phone. Esther, something's wrong with the door. My key isn't working. I'll let you in, I said, my voice steady. I opened the door to find Daniel looking tired but irritated. What happened to the lock? We had a security issue, I said vaguely. I had to change it, he frowned. You should have told me. There are many things we need to discuss, Daniel. But it's late. We'll talk in the morning. He studied my face, perhaps sensing something was different, but nodded. How's Kofi's arm? Healing. The children are asleep. In our bedroom, I watched as Daniel unpacked his suitcase. noting items I now knew had been at the Baltimore townhouse. He tried to kiss me, but I turned away, claiming a headache. As he showered, I texted Vivian. He's home. Everything set for tomorrow. Lying beside Daniel that night, listening to his familiar breathing, I felt like I was lying next to a predator. The man I had loved, built a life with, raised children with, was a carefully constructed fiction. Tomorrow, I would finally meet the real Daniel Owusu, and he would meet the real Esther, a woman he had gravely underestimated. The morning of confrontation arrived with a strange calm. I woke before Daniel, showered, and dressed carefully in a business suit that made me feel armored. I prepared breakfast for the children as usual, packing lunches and checking homework while Daniel slept late. His typical pattern after business trips. When the children were ready, Vivian texted that she was outside. I hugged each child a moment longer than usual. Vivian's taking you to school today, I explained. I need to talk to Dad about some important things. David, my perceptive oldest, studied my face. Is everything okay, Mom? I touched his cheek. Everything will be okay. I promise. We'll talk later. After they left, I went to the kitchen and poured a single cup of coffee. I placed the marriage certificate on the dining room table, along with printed bank statements showing the systematic withdrawal of funds. I positioned my laptop ready to show additional evidence. At 8:30, Daniel came downstairs, yawning. Morning, babe. Where are the kids? Vivian took them to school. We need to talk, Daniel. His expression shifted slightly, but he maintained his casual demeanor. Sure, what's up? Let me grab coffee first. There's none left, I lied. Sit down, please. He raised an eyebrow but took a seat across from me. You seem serious this morning. Without a word, I slid the marriage certificate across the table. His face remained neutral for perhaps 2 seconds before a flash of panic crossed his features, quickly replaced by practiced calmness. What's this? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Don't insult my intelligence, I replied. You know exactly what it is. Your marriage certificate to Aminata Diallo, your second wife. He stared at me, calculating. I could almost see him sorting through possible explanations, excuses, denials. Finally, he chose his approach. Esther, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like, I laughed, a sharp sound without humor. Really? Because it looks like my husband of 17 years illegally married another woman while still married to me. It looks like you've been living a double life for at least 5 years. It looks like you've been systematically stealing from our family to fund your second household in Baltimore. His eyes widened at the mention of Baltimore. I continued before he could speak. Yes, I know about the townhouse. I know about the $340,000 in the Caymans. I know Aminata is 6 weeks pregnant. I know everything, Daniel. The doorbell rang. That's Vivian, I said. I asked her to be here as a witness. Daniel's expression darkened. You involved Vivian in our private business. Our business stopped being private when you involved another woman in our marriage. I went to let Vivian in, positioning her in the living room where she could hear, but wasn't directly in the confrontation. When I returned, Daniel had composed himself. His charm switched on, the same charm that had blinded me for years. Esther, baby, I made a terrible mistake. I got caught in something complicated, but I never stopped loving you and the children. We can work through this. A mistake? I repeated. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or buying the wrong milk. You deliberately created an entire second life. You married another woman. You stole our family's financial security. These aren't mistakes, Daniel. These are choices. Criminal choices. He leaned forward, voice lowered. Keep your voice down. The neighbors. The neighbors are the least of your concerns right now. Bigamy is a felony. Financial fraud has serious consequences. You're facing criminal charges, not just a divorce. For the first time, real fear showed in his eyes. You wouldn't do that to the father of your children. You did this to yourself. You did this to our children when you decided your desires were more important than their security. He switched tactics, anger replacing charm. What exactly do you want, Esther? Money? You've clearly gone through my private things, invaded my privacy. What gives you the right? What gives me the right? My voice rose despite my determination to stay calm. 17 years of marriage. 3 children. building a life together that you were secretly dismantling. That gives me the right. I opened my laptop, turning it to show him photographs of the evidence. Bank records, credit card statements, the offshore account information, surveillance photos of him entering the Baltimore townhouse, screenshots from the hidden phone. How did you get all this? He demanded, standing abruptly. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have it all. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal documented. The mask fell completely then. Daniel's face transformed into something cold and calculating. Perhaps his true face, one I'd never fully seen before. What do you hope to accomplish with this little performance, Esther? You think you can threaten me? I've always been 3 steps ahead of you. Not anymore, I said calmly. I've frozen our joint accounts. I've filed emergency motions to prevent asset transfers. I've documented the money you've already taken. The courts will determine fair distribution, but you won't be stealing anything else. He paced the dining room, a caged predator. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'm beginning to understand exactly who I've been dealing with. A con man, a thief, a bigamist. You'd destroy our family over this? Think of the children, Esther. Don't you dare use our children as shields. You weren't thinking of them when you drained their college funds to buy jewelry for your second wife. He stopped pacing and studied me with narrowed eyes. What does Aminata know? Nothing yet. Unlike you, I don't enjoy causing innocent people pain, but she will know everything soon enough. Daniel ran his hands over his face, his mind visibly working through scenarios. When he looked up, his expression had changed again, now showing remorse, vulnerability. I need help, Esther, he said, his voice breaking. I got lost somewhere along the way. The pressure of providing for everyone, the expectations. I made terrible choices, but I can fix this. We can fix this together. It was a masterful performance. Even knowing everything I knew, some small part of me wanted to believe him. The same part that had believed him a year ago when he swore he'd never lie again. There is no fixing this, Daniel, I said quietly. There's only facing consequences and moving forward separately. You're really going to throw away 17 years? Everything we've built? You threw it away. You dynamited the foundation of our marriage with years of calculated deception. And what will you tell the children? That their father is a criminal? How will that help them? I'll tell them the truth in an age-appropriate way. That you made choices that hurt our family. That you'll always be their father, but can't be my husband anymore. Daniel's face hardened again. I want to see my lawyer before we discuss anything further. That's your right. But you should know the locks have been changed, and you won't be staying here tonight or any night moving forward. I've packed a bag for you. I gestured to a suitcase by the stairs. Your personal items, enough clothes for a week. The rest can be arranged through our attorneys. You're throwing me out of my own house? His voice rose dangerously. Our house. And yes, for the safety and emotional well-being of our children. You can't do this. This is my home. Actually, I can. It's in the emergency protection order I was granted yesterday based on evidence of your financial abuse and potential flight risk with our children. He lunged toward me then, grabbing my wrist. You think you've won? You think you can just... Vivian appeared in the doorway. I've called the police, Daniel. They'll be here in 2 minutes. I suggest you take your hands off Esther and leave peacefully. The sound of approaching sirens confirmed her words. Daniel released me, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. This isn't over, he said, grabbing the suitcase. You're right, I agreed. The divorce proceedings, criminal investigation, and custody arrangements are just beginning, but our marriage is definitely over. As 2 police officers approached our front door, Daniel grabbed his car keys. I need to make some calls. I'll be back for the rest of my things. Only with a police escort and prearranged time, I informed him. Those are the terms of the protection order. The officers entered as Daniel brushed past them, storming to his car. I showed them the legal paperwork, explaining the situation briefly. Would you like to file assault charges, ma'am? One officer asked, noting the red marks on my wrist. I considered it, then shook my head. Not at this time, but I would like it documented in your report. After they left, Vivian held me as the adrenaline ebbed and the delayed emotions flooded in. I sobbed against her shoulder, finally releasing the pain anger and grief I had contained during the confrontation. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "So strong, so clear. I'm so proud of you." When I could speak again, I wiped my eyes. That wasn't even the hardest part. Now I have to tell my children their father has been living a lie. The revelation to my children came that evening. I arranged for a family therapist recommended by Pastor Matthews to be present. We gathered in our living room, my children's faces showing confusion and worry. "Where's Dad?" Kofi asked, looking around. I took a deep breath. "That's what we need to talk about. Your father won't be living with us anymore." Their reactions varied with their ages and personalities. David, at 16, asked direct questions that I answered honestly without unnecessary detail. Abina, 14, cycled between tears and anger. Kofi, at 10, simply looked bewildered, asking if this was somehow his fault. "Nothing about this situation is anyone's fault except your father's," I assured them. "He made choices that mean our family will look different now. But my love for you will never change." The therapist helped guide the conversation, offering professional perspective and assuring the children that their feelings, whatever they were valid and important. Later that night, after the children were finally asleep, I received a text from an unknown number. "This isn't finished. You have no idea what you've started." DI forwarded it to Michael and Janelle, adding it to the growing file of evidence. The following days brought new challenges. Daniel hired an aggressive attorney who immediately contested the asset freeze and protection order. He denied the bigamy charges, claiming the marriage to Aminata was a spiritual ceremony, not legally binding, despite the official certificate. News traveled quickly through our community. Some friends rallied around us with support. Others distanced themselves, uncomfortable with the messy reality of our situation. My mother called daily from Ghana, offering to come stay with us. My sisters, who had always been wary of Daniel's charm, provided emotional support from a distance. At work, I requested a meeting with my director and HR representative, explaining the situation professionally and requesting flexibility as I navigated legal proceedings. They were supportive, offering adjusted hours and access to the company's employee assistance program. The most unexpected development came 8 days after the confrontation. My phone rang with an unknown number and I answered cautiously. "Is this Esther Owusu?" a woman's accented voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Aminata Diallo. I think we need to talk." My heart raced. "Yes, I think we do." We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a private table in the corner. When she entered, I recognized her immediately from the photographs. Tall, elegant, with a reserved dignity that matched my own. Our eyes met across the room, 2 women connected by the same deception. As she approached, I saw she was visibly pregnant, her hand protectively over her abdomen. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, taking the seat across from me. "How did you find out?" I asked. "A detective came to my door yesterday. She showed me documentation of Daniel's life with you, your marriage certificate, photos of your family, evidence that you were legally married years before he met me." Her voice trembled slightly. "She said you hadn't known about me either." I nodded. "I only discovered everything last week. I found your marriage certificate in his desk." Aminata closed her eyes briefly. "He told me his family was all in Ghana, that he had been alone in America until he met me, that his work in international shipping required secrecy and discretion." I believed everything. "So did I said softly. "For 17 years. We sat in silence for a moment, 2 strangers united by shared betrayal. "I'm pregnant," she said unnecessarily. "Almost 7 weeks. I know." She looked up sharply. "How?" "I found your letter in his Bible." She gave a bitter laugh. "The Bible I gave him. He never opened it when we were together, nor when he was with me." Another silence fell between us. Finally, she asked, "What will you do now?" "Divorce him. Protect my children and what's left of our assets. Move forward." I paused. "What will you do?" She touched her stomach again. "I don't know yet. In my culture, divorces..." She trailed off. "But I cannot stay with a man who built our life on lies." "The detective who contacted you, Janelle, she can help you understand your legal options." Aminata nodded. She gave me her card. She hesitated. Did you hate me when you found out? No, I answered honestly. I hated him. You were as much a victim as I was. She studied my face. You are very strong, very dignified. I admire that. We both are, I said. We have to be for our children. Before we parted, we exchanged phone numbers. Not as friends, we could never be that, but as allies navigating the aftermath of Daniel's destruction. That evening, as I sat alone in my bedroom reviewing financial documents, my phone lit up with a text from Aminata. He came to the house, tried to explain, said you were mentally unstable and fabricated evidence. I showed him the door. I believe you, not him. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Thank you for letting me know. Stay safe. The weeks that followed brought new revelations almost daily. Daniel's financial deception was even more extensive than initially discovered. Beyond the townhouse and offshore account, he had purchased commercial property in Baltimore under a business entity I hadn't known existed. He had credit cards in multiple names, storage units in 3 states, and connections to questionable business associates across the country. Most shocking was the discovery that Daniel had a criminal record under a different name in Illinois, fraud charges from before we met that he had somehow concealed. The man I married had been crafting deception since before I knew him. Each new revelation was painful, but also strangely liberating. The more I learned about the real Daniel Owusu, the more the fog of confusion and self-doubt lifted. I hadn't failed as a wife. I hadn't been blind or stupid. I had been systematically manipulated by a skilled con artist who had made deception his life's work. As we approached the preliminary divorce hearing, Daniel made one final attempt at manipulation. He appeared at our front door late one evening, ignoring the protection order, his eyes red from crying or drinking, possibly both. Esther, please, he begged when I spoke to him through the security camera. Let me explain everything. I've made terrible mistakes, but I love you. I love our family. Everything I did was to provide a better future for all of us. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called the police, watching through the window as they arrived and escorted him away. As his car disappeared down our street, I felt the last lingering thread of emotional attachment to him finally break. The man I had loved never existed. He was a character Daniel had created, a role he had played while systematically building a different life. The love I had felt, the memories I cherished, were real to me, but based on a fundamental deception. That night, I told my children their father had violated the court order and been removed by police. David, angry and protective, insisted on checking the locks before bed. Abena retreated to her room, declining dinner. Kofi climbed into my lap, something he hadn't done in years, asking if his father was a bad person. People are complicated, I told him, choosing my words carefully. Your father made very bad choices that hurt our family. That doesn't erase the good moments you remember with him, but it does mean our family needs to change to stay safe and healthy. As I held my youngest child, I realized that despite the pain and upheaval I was already healing, the woman who had discovered that marriage certificate just weeks ago would have been devastated by Daniel's tearful appearance at our door. The woman I was becoming recognized it as just another performance. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for the following week. I was ready to face whatever came next, not as Daniel Owusu's betrayed wife, but as Esther Owusu, a woman of strength, dignity, and unshakable resolve. The day before the preliminary hearing, I received an urgent call from Michael, my attorney. Esther, Daniel has filed an emergency motion claiming you're mentally unstable and seeking temporary custody of the children. He's assembled 3 witnesses who claim you've been acting erratically since his departure. My blood ran cold. What witnesses? His mother, who's apparently flown in from Ghana, a neighbor who claims you've been having loud arguments with yourself in the backyard, and a coworker who states you've been unstable at work. I recognized this tactic immediately. The neighbor must be Mrs. Klein, who's hardly spoken to me in 5 years. And I don't have a coworker who would say that. I've been completely professional. The coworker is listed as James Wilson. Do you know him? I frowned. There's no James Wilson at my hospital. This is fabricated. I suspected as much. But we need to be prepared for the hearing tomorrow. Daniel is playing dirty. After hanging up, I called Vivian in a panic. He's trying to take my children. He's creating false witnesses to make me look unstable. Stay calm, Vivian counseled. We'll gather your support system. You have actual witnesses to your stability and competence, your director at work, the children's teachers and counselors, Pastor Matthews, me, other friends. Truth outweighs lies. I spent the evening preparing, collecting character reference letters, documentation of my stable work history, and evidence of my ongoing support for the children throughout the crisis. I also realized I needed to warn Aminata. If Daniel was willing to fabricate evidence against me, he might try similar tactics with her. She answered my call immediately. Esther, is everything okay? I explained the situation, warning her to be vigilant about any sudden witnesses appearing or claims about her mental state. Thank you for the warning, she said. Actually, I've already experienced something similar. A woman claiming to be from Child Protective Services came to evaluate my home environment yesterday. When I asked for identification, she couldn't produce proper credentials. I refused her entry and called the real CPS, who confirmed they had no case involving me. He's getting desperate, I said. Be careful, you too. We need to protect our children. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a conservative suit, my hair neatly styled, the picture of professional composure. The children were staying with Vivian's family for the day. As I drove to the courthouse, my phone rang with an unknown number. Mrs. Owusu? This is Detective Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit. We need to speak with you regarding evidence of money laundering through your joint accounts with Daniel Owusu. My heart raced. I've been fully cooperative with the investigation. My attorney has provided all requested information. This is new evidence suggesting you are an active participant in the fraud schemes. We need you to come to the station immediately. Something felt wrong. May I have your badge number, Detective? A brief hesitation. This is an urgent matter, Mrs. Owusu. Any delay could result in... I hung up and immediately called the Financial Crimes Unit directly, asking for Detective Martinez. As I suspected, no such detective worked there. Another of Daniel's manipulations, trying to prevent me from appearing at the hearing. When I arrived at the courthouse, I was met by Michael and his associate, prepared with extensive documentation. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw Daniel with a woman I recognized from photos as his mother, though we had never met in person. Beside them stood an older white woman, I assumed was the neighbor, and a young man in a suit, presumably the fictional James Wilson. Daniel's attorney approached Michael with a folder. We've prepared a proposed agreement regarding temporary custody that would avoid unnecessary testimony today. Michael accepted the folder and reviewed it with me. The proposed agreement was breathtaking in its audacity. Daniel would have primary custody with me granted supervised visitation, pending psychiatric evaluation. This is absurd, I whispered. He thinks I'll accept this? It's a tactical move, Michael explained. They know it's unreasonable, but they're setting an extreme position to negotiate from. When we entered the courtroom, I was surprised to see Aminata sitting quietly in the back row. Our eyes met briefly, her expression offering silent solidarity. The hearing began with Daniel's attorney presenting his emergency motion, painting a picture of me as a woman whose mental stability had collapsed upon discovering my husband's brief indiscretion. The three witnesses were presented as concerned individuals who had observed my erratic behavior. When Michael cross-examined the supposed co-worker, the man's story quickly unraveled. He couldn't correctly name my department, my supervisor, or even the location of my office within the hospital. The neighbor similarly faltered when asked specific questions about when and where she had observed the alleged behavior. Daniel's mother, however, was a more formidable witness. Speaking with quiet dignity, she described phone calls where I had supposedly threatened self-harm and harmed the children if Daniel didn't return home. Mrs. Owusu, Michael addressed her, can you provide phone records showing these calls took place? We spoke on my son's phone, she replied smoothly. And when exactly did you arrive in the United States? 2 weeks ago, when my son called me about his wife's deterioration. Michael produced immigration records. These show you arrived just 3 days ago. How do you explain this discrepancy? Her composure slipped momentarily before Daniel's attorney objected. When it was our turn to present evidence, Michael methodically dismantled the picture Daniel had tried to create. My hospital director testified to my exemplary performance and professional behavior throughout the crisis. The children's school counselor described my proactive approach to ensuring their emotional support. Pastor Matthews spoke of my spiritual strength and clarity during an extremely difficult period. Most powerful was the documentation. Financial records showing Daniel's systematic theft, the illegal second marriage certificate, evidence of multiple false identities, and the protective measures I had taken to ensure the children's stability and security. When Daniel took the stand, he presented himself as a devoted father whose wife had become paranoid and vengeful after misinterpreting a spiritual ceremony with a friend. He claimed the financial irregularities were legitimate, business investments that I had always known about but never understood due to my limited financial comprehension under D. Michael's cross-examination, the facade began to crack. When confronted with specific dates, amounts, and documentation, Daniel's smooth explanations became contradictory and defensive. When shown photographs of himself entering the Baltimore townhouse on dates he claimed to be in Singapore, his composure slipped further. "These images are manipulated," he insisted. "My wife hired someone to fabricate evidence against me. The court has verified these images with the original security camera timestamps," Michael countered. "Would you like to revise your testimony?" The judge, a woman in her 60s with decades of family court experience, interrupted. "Mr. Owusu, are you aware that making false statements under oath constitutes perjury?" Daniel glanced at his attorney, who subtly shook his head. "I may have misspoken about certain dates, Your Honor. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and calmly, describing the discovery of the marriage certificate, the systematic investigation I had conducted, and my primary concern throughout, protecting my children's emotional and financial security." "Mrs. Owusu," the judge asked directly, "what are you seeking from these proceedings?" "Protection for my children, Your Honor. Financial security through fair division of legitimate marital assets, and primary physical custody to maintain stability in their lives during this difficult transition." The judge studied me carefully. "And what about your husband's visitation rights?" "I believe the children need a relationship with their father. But given the current circumstances, including his violation of the protection order and attempts to remove them from my custody, through false claims, I would request supervised visitation until a full psychological evaluation is completed." As the hearing concluded, the judge announced she would issue her ruling the following day, but made a preliminary statement. "Based on evidence presented today, I find no credible basis for emergency custody modification. The temporary protection order will remain in effect, and all asset freezes will continue pending full financial discovery." Outside the courtroom, I found myself face-to-face with Daniel's mother. Despite everything, cultural respect made me incline my head slightly in greeting. "You have destroyed my son," she said quietly in Twi, our native language. "Your son destroyed himself," I replied in the same language, "and he nearly destroyed me and your grandchildren in the process." Her eyes flickered with something. Doubt, perhaps, or the first recognition of truth. Without another word, she turned and walked away. As I gathered my belongings, Aminata approached hesitantly. "I hope you don't mind that I came. I wanted to understand what we're facing." "I'm glad you were here," I said sincerely. "Did it help?" She nodded. "I see more clearly now who he truly is. The performance, the manipulation, it's chilling. Have you decided what you'll do?" She placed a hand on her stomach. "Yes, I'm filing for annulment based on fraud, and I'm returning to Senegal to have my baby among family who truly love me." I felt unexpected compassion for this woman who would always be connected to my life story. "Your child will be a half-sibling to my children." "Yes," she said softly. "Perhaps someday, when wounds have healed, they might know each other." That night, a severe thunderstorm hit our area. As lightning flashed and thunder rattled the windows, my phone rang. Daniel's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "What do you want, Daniel?" His voice was slurred, emotional. "You've taken everything from me. My home, my children, my reputation, my future. Are you satisfied now?" "I didn't take anything from you," I replied calmly. "You gambled everything on a lie and lost. That's not my responsibility. Aminata is leaving me, he said, his voice breaking. She's going back to Senegal with my baby. Did you know that? Did you convince her to do that? I didn't need to convince her of anything. She saw the truth for herself today. His tone darkened. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I still have resources you know nothing about. I still have plans. Is that a threat, Daniel? It's a promise. You'll regret. I hung up and immediately called Michael, who advised me to document the call and notify the police about the implied threat. I then called Aminata to warn her about Daniel's state of mind. That night, as the storm raged outside, I gathered my children in my bedroom. We talked, played board games, and eventually fell asleep together. David protectively positioned nearest the door. Abina curled against my side. Kofi sprawled across the foot of the bed. Looking at their sleeping faces, I felt both profound sadness for what they had lost and fierce determination to protect what remained. Daniel had detonated our family structure, but he couldn't destroy the love that bound us together. The next morning brought unsettling news. Daniel hadn't returned to his hotel room. His rental car was found abandoned in a shopping center parking lot. His phone was turned off. His attorney claimed to have no knowledge of his whereabouts. A cold fear gripped me. Daniel was unpredictable, desperate, and, I now understood, capable of elaborate deceptions. I notified the police, increased security at our home, and kept the children home from school as a precaution. The judge issued her ruling as scheduled, granting me temporary primary custody and maintaining all financial restrictions on Daniel. Given his disappearance, she added a specific prohibition against him removing the children from the state. By evening, with no sign of Daniel, the police began treating his disappearance with greater urgency. His credit card showed no activity. Airport and border crossing checks revealed no movement under his known identities. My fear deepened when Janelle called. Esther, the offshore account in the Caymans was emptied yesterday morning, all $340,000, and there's something else. Daniel has another passport under the name David Mensah with a different birth date. Immigration has no record of that identity leaving the country, but it's possible he used other means. The crisis peaked when I received a text from an unknown international number. You'll never see me again. Neither will the children. Tell them their father is dead. It's your fault. Police traced the message to a burner phone purchased in Canada. Border Patrol had no record of Daniel crossing into Canada, but the border is vast and porous in many areas. For 3 agonizing days, the uncertainty continued. The children sensed my anxiety despite my attempts to maintain normalcy. David became hypervigilant, checking locks repeatedly. Abina withdrew further. Kofi had nightmares. On the 4th day, Janelle arrived at my door with news. Daniel was spotted boarding a cargo ship in Montreal bound for West Africa. He used the David Mensah identity and bribed a crew member for passage. Canadian authorities confirmed the identification through port security footage. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed with conflicting emotions. Relief that the immediate threat was removed, grief for what this final abandonment would mean for my children, and lingering fear about what might still be hidden. Is it really over? I asked Janelle. Not entirely, she said honestly. The divorce proceedings will continue in his absence. There are still financial matters to unravel, and someday he might return. But for now, yes, this chapter is closing. That evening, I gathered my children in our living room. With the family therapist present for support, I explained that their father had left the country, likely permanently. Did he say goodbye? Kofi asked, his voice small. No, sweetheart, he didn't. Is he coming back? Abina's question was barely audible. I don't think so. Not for a very long time, if ever. David, my oldest, asked the hardest question. Did he ever really love us? I chose my words carefully. Your father is a complicated person who has difficulty with truth and commitment. I believe he loves you in the way he's capable of loving, but that love wasn't strong enough to keep him here facing the consequences of his choices. The weeks that followed brought painful adjustments, but also the first fragile steps toward healing. The court granted my divorce petition in Daniel's absence, awarding me full custody of the children and all marital assets in the United States, though the offshore funds remained beyond reach. Aminata and I spoke occasionally. An unusual alliance formed through shared trauma. She returned to Senegal as planned. later informing me she had given birth to a healthy baby boy. We agreed that someday, when appropriate, our children should know of their connection to each other. Financial recovery was challenging. Despite the court's ruling, many of the assets Daniel had controlled remained elusive. The commercial property in Baltimore was heavily mortgaged. The townhouse he had shared with Aminata was sold, but after settling liens, little equity remained. My lawyer assured me Daniel could be prosecuted for financial fraud and bigamy if he ever returned to the United States, but that provided little practical help for our immediate needs. I returned to work full-time, grateful for my career and the financial independence it provided. I put our family home on the market. It held too many memories and was more expensive than we could now afford. We found a smaller house closer to the children's schools, a fresh start in a new neighborhood where we weren't known as the family with the vanished father. 6 months after Daniel's disappearance, an unexpected package arrived from Ghana. It contained a letter from Daniel's mother, written in her careful hand. Esther, my son has brought shame to our family and great pain to you and the children. I have seen him here in Accra. He is living well on money that should have secured my grandchildren's future. I defended him because he is my son, but I cannot ignore the truth any longer. Please accept these family heirlooms that rightfully belong to your children. They are their Ghanaian heritage, regardless of their father's actions. May God grant you and the children peace and healing. The package contained traditional gold jewelry and cultural artifacts, valuable, both financially and as connections to their heritage. I stored these carefully, treasures to be shared with my children when they were ready to reconnect with that part of their identity. Throughout this period, my children struggled in different ways. David became intensely protective, taking on pseudo-paternal responsibilities that I gently discouraged while honoring his need to contribute. Abina's academic performance suffered as she processed her grief through withdrawal and occasional outbursts. Kofi developed separation anxiety, needing constant reassurance that I wouldn't disappear as well. The family therapy continued, supplemented by individual counseling for each child. Slowly, painfully, we established new routines, new traditions, new ways of being a family without the father they had known and lost. A year after finding the marriage certificate, I stood in our new backyard watching my children play with neighbors. David was teaching Kofi to throw a football, while Abina sat nearby sketching the scene. They still carried wounds, still asked occasional questions about their father, still struggled with the abandonment. But they were healing. We all were. That evening, I received a text from Aminata with a photo of her son, now 6 months old. He has his siblings' eyes, she wrote. Someday they should know him. I studied the infant's face, seeing echoes of my own children as babies. Yes, I replied. Someday, life would never be what I had once believed it would be. The future I had planned with Daniel was revealed as an illusion, a carefully constructed deception. But in its place, something authentic was emerging, a life built on truth, resilience, and the unbreakable bonds of genuine love. The woman who had once believed in her husband's tearful promises now stood alone, but unbroken. The marriage certificate that had shattered my world had also, paradoxically, set me free. 18 months after Daniel's disappearance, my life had found a new rhythm. The children were adjusting to our changed circumstances with resilience that made me fiercely proud. Our smaller house had become a true home, filled with photographs, art projects, and evidence of our healing journey. I had received a promotion at the hospital, the financial stability allowing me to rebuild our savings and begin college funds for the children. Then came the email that disrupted our hard-won peace. It was from a journalist named Marcus Rivera, writing for an investigative news site. I'm researching a story on international financial fraud involving multiple identities. Daniel Owusu's name has appeared in my investigation. I understand you were married to him. Would you be willing to speak with me about your experiences? I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. We had finally reached a place of relative calm. Did I want to reopen these wounds? After consulting with Michael, I agreed to a preliminary conversation with Marcus, with my attorney present. What I learned during that meeting convinced me that full justice had not yet been served. Daniel Owusu, also known as David Mensah, Emmanuel Osei, and at least 3 other identities, is part of a sophisticated network operating between North America, Europe, and West Africa, Marcus explained, showing us documentation. They target vulnerable individuals for romantic and financial exploitation while moving money through legitimate-appearing businesses. Are you saying my husband was part of an organized criminal enterprise? I asked, stunned. Based on my evidence, he wasn't just part of it. He was one of its key operators in the United States. Marcus's investigation revealed a pattern stretching back nearly 20 years. Daniel had multiple wives before me, women whose financial and emotional lives he had devastated across 3 countries. The Baltimore situation with Aminata wasn't an isolated indiscretion. It was part of his established methodology. Why are you bringing this to me? I asked. 2 reasons, Marcus replied. First, your experience could help other victims recognize the warning signs before losing everything. Second, federal authorities are building a case against this network, and your testimony could be crucial. After careful consideration and discussions with my children, excluding the youngest from the more disturbing details, I decided to cooperate with both the journalist and the federal investigation. Justice wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about preventing others from suffering the same devastation. Working with Marcus, I helped construct a comprehensive timeline of Daniel's activities during our marriage, identifying patterns that might connect to the larger operation. I provided access to financial records, correspondence, and documentation I had gathered during my initial investigation. The federal agents assigned to the case, Agents Morales and Chen, interviewed me extensively about Daniel's business contacts, travel patterns, and communication habits. They were particularly interested in the offshore accounts and the commercial property in Baltimore, which they suspected was used for money laundering. Based on our investigation, we believe your husband may have defrauded individuals and institutions of over $4 million during the period you were married, Agent Morales explained. The good news is we've located some of these assets, and as his legal wife in the United States, you may have claim to a portion of what's recovered. This prospect of financial justice was meaningful, not for personal enrichment, but for securing my children's future that Daniel had jeopardized. The investigation expanded to include interviews with Aminata, who provided valuable information about Daniel's activities and contacts in Baltimore. Though still in Senegal, she participated in video depositions and shared documentation that further strengthened the case. As weeks passed, my cooperation with authorities intensified. I reviewed photographs of Daniel's associates, identifying those who had visited our home or whom I had met at work functions. I recalled conversations that had seemed innocent at the time, but now revealed subtle references to the operation. The most difficult aspect was protecting my children during this process. I arranged for additional therapy sessions, particularly for David, who was now old enough to understand more of the investigation. When he asked if his father was a criminal, I answered honestly, yes. Your father made choices that hurt many people and broke many laws, but that doesn't define who you are or who you will become. 4 months into the investigation, a significant breakthrough occurred. Federal agents raided a property in Philadelphia, connected to Daniel's network, seizing computers, documents, and digital storage devices. Among the evidence was a hard drive containing detailed records of the operation, including Daniel's current location and activities in Ghana. Through diplomatic channels, Ghanaian authorities were notified. Within days, Daniel and 3 associates were taken into custody in Accra. The charges were extensive: wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, bigamy, financial exploitation, and numerous violations of international banking laws. Agent Chen called with the news. He's being held pending extradition proceedings. Given the nature and extent of the crimes, he's facing potential sentences that could keep him imprisoned for decades. That evening, I gathered my children to tell them their father had been arrested. Their reactions reflected their ages and personalities. David asked detailed questions about the charges and potential sentences. Abina retreated to her room without comment.